And now from PAX TV Studio 611, your host, Richard Thomas.
Good evening, and welcome to It's a Miracle. You're about to take an emotional roller coaster ride, reliving moments in some very special people's lives that can only be described in emotional terms. Devastating, heart-wrenching, frightening, yet ultimately joyous, exhilarating, and miraculous. We begin in Gainesville, Georgia, March 1998, tornado season. On the morning of March 20th, 1998, Hall County, Georgia firefighter Wayne Holcomb was fast asleep when an emergency call came in. A local grade school had just been hit by a tornado.
When the call came in that it was a tornado touchdown, possible injuries, a lot of things go through your mind. The possibility of teachers getting there early, children getting there, parents dropping them off. I didn't know what kind of injuries we would have there.
As the firemen rushed to leave, they encountered a major problem. The storm suddenly knocked out the electricity, and the doors to the firehouse refused to open. All except one.
I pushed the button, and the door went up.
Strick, get the ladders. Door won't work.
I did not manually unlock the door, nor did anybody else lift the door. It went up on its own.
Unaware of the other's dilemma, Wayne headed toward the disaster area alone.
I kept looking in the mirror to see where the engine and the ambulance was, and I didn't see it. Usually we're in sight of one another all the way to the call.
Wayne didn't know it, but he was heading straight into the path of the tornado.
All of a sudden it began to rain harder than I've ever seen it. It was almost like somebody pouring buckets, tubs, barrels, whatever, of water just directly on you. The rain was so hard you couldn't see anything in front of you. The windshield wipers were on full blast. They were going just as hard as they could go, and it was like I didn't have windshield wipers.
In another part of town, Michelle Roper was about to wake her daughters for school when she noticed something strange.
I looked out my window and the whole sky was washed in ammonia yellow. I heard a voice tell me, "It's a tornado, get the girls now."
Then Michelle heard a terrifying sound.
A roar. It was like a freight train coming in our backyard. I ran to my daughter's room and it sounded like the train was about to crash into the house.
With just moments to spare, Michelle pushed her children into a small windowless bathroom. Perhaps they'd be safe there.
I remember just standing there for just like a split second thinking, what do we do next?
And that's when it hit the house.
Wayne Holcomb was only a mile and a half from the fire station when he too was overtaken by the storm.
Debris started hitting my truck, pieces of trees, limbs. Next thing I know, my truck was sitting sideways in the road. I can't explain how scared I was at that time.
Back at the Ropers' home, the tornado was ripping through the house with an incredible force.
I could feel just all kinds of stuff hitting my back and my head and just all over. I remember wondering what was going on. Was this a nightmare? Was it really happening?
I was holding Graham and I was hanging on as tight as I could. I felt like something was holding me down, but yet Graham was being lifted up in the air and I was hanging on to him. I heard the voice say, "Hang on to the baby." And I did with every ounce of strength that I had.
I did not close my eyes. If this was going to be my last few seconds on Earth, I wanted to see what was happening to me.
Terrifying conclusion when It's a Miracle continues.
Next, the Roper family's home takes a direct hit from the tornado.
All of a sudden, everything just exploded. It was there 1 second, the next second it wasn't.
On the morning of March 20th, 1998, a tornado struck Hall County, Georgia, and Michelle Roper and her children were trapped in its path. As they huddled together in a small bathroom, the fury of the storm ripped away sections of their home as the power of the tornado's winds lifted them off the floor. And then, total disaster struck.
All of a sudden, everything just exploded. It was there 1 second, the next second it wasn't.
1 second we were in the shrill, the roars, the shrieks, and then it was silence.
As suddenly as it had appeared, the tornado was gone. At that same moment, Wayne Holcomb finally realized how close his life had come to ending.
I could see devastation and destruction everywhere. Houses totally destroyed, trees down, power lines down, vehicles overturned, roofs gone off of some houses. Nothing was in place. Nothing is where it should have been.
The only thing left of the Roper home was a tiny patch of linoleum where they'd huddled together.
I looked over at my daughters and they were covered in debris. Summer had blood on her, but they were alive. And I was still holding Graham, and then I looked down and he was just covered in blood, and he had a huge gaping hole in his head.
We've got to get help for your brother now. Hurry.
And that same voice said, "Go down the road." It was like walking through a war zone. It just did not seem real. I kept thinking I'm going to wake up and this is just a really bad dream.
And then, as if it had been miraculously blown there by the storm, Michelle spotted Wayne's fire truck.
They were running toward me, and I could tell at that time the baby was bleeding pretty bad. The baby's arms were limp. He was like laying a dish rag over your arms. To me, he was dead. I couldn't get any vital signs from him. I put my face down, could not feel any air moving through him.
There was no movement, and I just wanted my baby whole and healthy again.
She was hollering, "What can she do?" And I just told her to pray. I knew that it would take more than what I could do to help that child. I did not want to tell her that the baby may be dead. I did not want to have to look at that mother in the eyes and say, "There's nothing I can do." Why don't y'all go get in the truck, girls? Y'all go get in the truck, okay?
Just as things were looking hopeless, off-duty firefighter Gene Grizzle pulled up in his truck.
It just seemed like a miracle to me that Gene showed up. I said, "Gene, get the oxygen. We need to get some oxygen on this kid."
I could see the firemen working on my brother, trying to give him oxygen.
What flow do you want? Give me full flow.
I just remember praying that God wouldn't take Graham and that he would be okay.
With each passing minute, the chances for Graham to survive became less and less, until finally, a hopeful sign.
I noticed the child's eyes fluttering a little bit.
See his eyes flutter? He's gonna be okay.
I told his mother, "He's alive. He's gonna be okay." Not knowing that he would be okay, but at that time I knew he was alive.
45 minutes passed before additional help finally weaved its way through the field of debris to reach the injured boy.
The ambulances were going all over the county. There were injuries, confirmed fatalities. We put Graham into the ambulance, laid him on the stretcher. He started to cry a little bit and then went back unconscious. And I kissed the baby on the head. And I said, God, this is a small child. Reach down here and touch him. And if it's your will, let him live.
Graham was transported to Northeast Georgia Medical Center in Gainesville, where doctors made a horrifying discovery.
They did a CAT scan on Graham to determine the extent of his injuries, and this CAT scan showed a puncture wound to the brain.
Graham was immediately rushed to Eggleston Children's Hospital in Atlanta, where doctors were standing by to perform emergency brain surgery.
They took him into surgery, but at 5 o'clock, the doctor said they could find no puncture wound to the brain, said he had a fractured skull, and he had been impacted with a blunt object.
What kind of game would you play with him?
Graham made an amazing recovery and was able to return home in just a few days.
Let's do it again.
When I look at Graham,
What do you want to do? All right, I love you.
I just
I love you.
marvel
I love
that
you
he's
more.
here.
I love
He's just a living example of a miracle. If Graham hadn't survived, there would have been a huge hole in our family that nothing could replace.
Graham's just like a big ball of sunshine to me. He's just so happy most of the time. He means a lot to me, and I wouldn't trade him in for anything.
He's a very energetic little 4-year-old boy. He's playful, bubbly, delightful to be around. It's just a joy every time that I see him now.
Where's my kiss?
Wayne was heaven sent for him to have been where he was at that exact moment when we needed him. He is just a living, breathing angel, wearing a fireman's suit.
To fully understand the strength of the tornado that hit their home, you may be interested to know that Summer Roper's team jacket was found nearly 60 miles away.